Top of the morning to ya laddies, my name is FlapjackPants23 and this is going to be a world tour of my survival world. So as you may know, the Prairie 10 SMP has ended, and when it ended I thought, man, it would be cool to play my survival world again. I created this world I believe 3 years ago. During that time I've made it to day 2685. This is my current base. This is a city area, but my old base is actually about 800 blocks that way, and Spawn Town is somewhere over there. So we'll visit the whole world. This is going to be a comprehensive world tour of everything, and we're going to start off here at what is currently my base. As you can see, it's inspired off the Mojang building guide. This is kind of how they suggest you build a survival base. I thought it was pretty cool, pretty nostalgic. So as you can see right here, I have an enchanting area, and then this is my main storage. There's not too much to it, it's a manual storage for now. Down here is my mine. I originally had an elevator here, which is what this button is for, but the elevator got stuck at one point and broke, and so I've just left this here. So that's my base, and then the next biggest structure here is going to be the Orthodox Church. As you can see, I'll fly up here. This is a whole thing. So the reason I decided to build this is because I figured in my city there's going to be 3 centerpieces, because there's going to be 3 main squares. So this is the first kind of square. If I fly out here, you can see I have a square here, there's going to be a square there, and then a square over there. This is going to be the first one. It's going to be the church of the city. And so as you can see, I built this out of sandstone because that's a renewable resource I have in my world. We'll get to that later. A fun fact about this is that all of the gold that you see everywhere, including the ceiling, all of this raw gold, all of it was mined manually in the Mesa mountains in the distance, and I mined all of it manually instead of farming it because I just felt like if I used gold from hell in an Orthodox church, which was incredibly ironic, then I just felt like that wouldn't be very appropriate. So it took me many weeks to get the gold for this. It doesn't look like a lot, but that's actually, I think it's about 9 stacks of gold blocks. So it was a crazy amount of gold, but this is the current centerpiece to the city. Okay, so moving along this way, I'm going to talk about these buildings and then those. This right here is my current cobblestone, stone, and basalt farm. This is a farm by, it's actually been so long ago that I don't remember who, but I'll put the link in the description and I'll put it on screen who made this. Right here, this button turns the farm on. Starts off as cobblestone, but you can turn it to stone mode, which will make stone, and then you can turn it to basalt mode here, which makes basalt. And then there's some minecart hoppers below the soil that collects everything, and this is how I get all my basalt in this world. I also have some masons here, and pickaxe and food system that will automatically dispense it through this bubble column here while I'm AFKing. Yeah, this is my current stone, cobblestone, and basalt farm. An interesting fact about this building is that actually on the interior here, where all of this quartz was actually once wood, just like the outside pillars here. But then one time I left the farm on, and I didn't realize this when designing, but lava can actually burn stuff through blocks, and so the whole thing caught on fire, and this whole building actually burned down. Luckily, I realized and stopped the fire before it spread to the whole city, but that could have been a lot worse, but this building did burn down before. Okay, next up here is this little terracotta building, which is my pumpkin and melon farm. This is, aside from my storage, this is probably where I spend the second most amount of time. So I have a Il Mango farm up here, which pushes down the pumpkins and melons from the top, as you can see, instead of from the sides, and a hopper minecart collects it. And this is more efficient because it's lossless compared to farms that push horizontally, because sometimes melons and pumpkins will get stuck. That doesn't really happen here. All of them get picked up. And they get deposited into these chests here, so they get turned into bone meal. This is my main source of XP inside the city for now, and I have a lot of farmers here to trade. I also have right here a pumpkin pusher that you can actually automatically carve pumpkins. So if you take pumpkins, put them in your offhand, take shears, and then I have a macro on my mouse that allows me to right click super quickly, but if you aim at this block and click, you can mass produce jack-o'-lanterns. And so that's how I get those. You can also see I get a ton of seeds as well. Okay, so moving on from this building here, we get to this. This is my automatic furnace array. And so this is also an El Mango design. There's 46 furnaces here, and it uses redstone to evenly distribute items you want to smelt, which go up here, and fuel, which goes here, and it outputs the result here. An interesting fact about this building is that this is actually my first ever time interacting with copper. I just smelt a ton of copper to build this roof, which was pretty interesting because I gathered all the materials before constructing the smelter itself. I smelted all the copper for the ceiling actually in a smelter that looked like this. It was a 2-furnace smelter. And it took several days to do it, and it was only halfway through that I realized I could have just started building the actual smelter and got it done in a few minutes, but at that point I just decided to stick with it. So there's a smelter out in the spawn town that smelted all of the copper. So moving on from this building here is my Grand Hotel. This is the most recent building I've added to the city. I added this a few days ago. And it's also the tallest building other than the church. So what I did with this building is I really tried to play with light. Everything here is light level 1, 2, or 3, and I have tinted glass everywhere, just to create a kind of cozy, romantic atmosphere here for the hotel. And as you can see, all of this is hiding a sugarcane farm. This hotel was kind of inspired by some of the hotels and restaurants I saw while I was in France. But all the rooms are pretty small. They look like this. There's 2 beds, some armor stands, and some decorations. There's also another floor, but I won't get to that. And so now that we've seen everything on this side, we can go over here. So as you can see right here in this building, if you watch Grian, in his Hermitcraft 7 series, he built a building that looked exactly like this, which was the barge. And this was inspired by the barge, but I actually think that Grian, when building the barge, actually used a design from one of his older videos, in which he described it as a garden, as a greenhouse garden. So that's what I went with here. This is a greenhouse garden. This is my cactus farm, as you can see right here. And I just felt like it was cool to have an actual like agricultural farm as a greenhouse garden, and I'm planning on doing that with a lot more of my kind of agricultural farms in the future. Moving on over here, right here, this is my honey farm. You can't see the mechanism because I designed this really quickly. I didn't think it through very well. But this is my honey farm. Behind there is an ENX04 honey farm design. I think it's a very cool farm design. That guy, he makes probably some of the most concise, best single-player farms in all of Minecraft, I think. So honey blocks, or actually honey bottles, get deposited here. Honeycomb gets deposited here, and I put bottles up here. And this has supplied me with more than enough to wax my ceiling to the smelter there and provide for redstone projects. Then here we get to this building. So this is my bamboo farm. Storage is smaller, but the farm you can actually see here through these bars. It's the same design as the sugarcane farm in the hotel. What's special about this farm is that, as you can see by this little survival setup, is that this was actually the first house that I built in this new city. I started this new city project, as I said, after the end of the Prairie 10 SMP, and I think I've made pretty good progress so far. But this was the start of it all. This building right here. And as you can see in the beginning, I built this, then these two, then everything outwards like that, and then the church. So as you can see, it starts off as kind of like a medieval theme, and I wanted to run with that, but I eventually ran out of ideas for buildings that look like this, and I eventually branched out into all kinds of other stuff. But the first two buildings here are medieval. The next main building here, and I say main building because this hosts a farm and this does not. This is actually the villager breeder. As you can see, I have all my villagers here. This is a design by Logical Geek Boy that I think is pretty simple and pretty cool. It's just a one farmer villager, one other villager, and then whenever they get enough food, they breed. But what I added was a weighted pressure plate over there, such that whenever this farm gets to 20 villagers, it'll push out this piston and block their access to the beds, which stops them from breeding. There's some Enderman damage over here. Let's fix this up. But yeah, the reason that the second building here doesn't have a farm in it is because this farm was so large that I decided to cover it up with two buildings, and we'll talk about what's underneath this one in a second. So this is the cafe style. So this is a bar slash cafe, and I'm planning on eventually at some point adding a farm to this by making some kind of automatic potion brewer in the back, and this is where I can store the potions. But for now it's just empty, and there's not much of a reason to be here, but I think it's a pretty cool vibe. Actually, a few years ago in Roblox, in Welcome to Bloxburg, I actually built a Taco Bell that looked exactly like this. And so the reason I made the layout look like this is because, with a painting there too, this is just to kind of harken back to that. I don't think I have any screenshots, but that was something that I built at one point. And now that we're kind of getting done with this city, I want to talk about some of my future plans. So, as I said before, the church is kind of the main centerpiece for now, but there's going to be two other centerpieces. The one that is going to eventually, in the future, go here is probably going to be my new main storage. It's going to be a castle that goes up to as high as the church, potentially higher. So I have a lot of plans for that. I don't want to get into it now, but that's going to be pretty cool. And then the third centerpiece, probably being close to where that forest is now, I want to keep as like a natural park. Maybe even incorporating the terrain right there. For the rest of the city, I've just kind of built over it, but over there, it would be very cool to kind of incorporate the natural terrain. Surrounding the city here are these walls. Despite using only a few blocks, I think I've actually used depth pretty well to add some very strong character to these walls. I actually really like these. So the reason I built this city where it is because if I look on my world map here, right here, this area is the border between pre 1.18 world generation and post 1.18 world generation. So I believe I just kind of flew over these at one point, loaded these chunks, but didn't explore any further. And when I came back in 1.18, there's these majestic mountains in the background, and it's such a cool contrast between like old and new that kind of characterizes this whole city. and I thought that was really cool. Okay, so we are done with this city, but there's actually more to see in this world. So I'm gonna go to the old base that I had here, and I'm gonna go through the nether because I want to show you the nether hub. Okay, so this is my nether hub. I think this is a bit unorthodox, but I think it's a really efficient and interesting way to build it. So this whole system here is centered around my old main base, which is this portal. That's the current portal. This goes to my clay mine, and then that's the swamp, and then this here goes to the gold farm, and that's the end portal. So we go through here. This is my old base. So this was my cave base that I actually lived in for a few years. I spent several years here. I just never felt like building anything more serious. And so I guess I'll run through this. You can see I have my furnaces and a composter set up. The storage used to go here. There was a bunch of chests. I've left two, which are antiques and some random stuff that I didn't think was worth bringing. So antiques has the dragon egg, my first wooden pickaxe, my first wooden axe, a bunch of old tools in general. And then this right here was some stuff that I accidentally left in a chest at a spawner farm. And I found that, I put everything into the shulker and I put it here. That had to have been the first week of this world, so I decided to just keep that safe in here. I'm gonna move these eventually into the new city, but for now they'll just be in here. I have my cows and sheep. I moved all the items here. Here's my portal, as you saw earlier, and my chicken setup. There's got to be hundreds and hundreds of them in there, and there's a lot of eggs. But basically, if I flip this lever, it's going to start producing even more chickens. Over here, there's a little indoor garden that has bone meal, because this is where I would bone meal these tall flowers to get dyes. I still think the best way to get dyes are to bone meal tall flowers and then combine them into different dyes. Of course, along with cacti, brown dye. With those, you can combine them into basically every color. Right here was an old mine that I had, but I stopped using it after I switched to the clay area, which we'll get to eventually. So over here is an old mine that I had, actually the first mine. So we can actually head down here. I made a little minecart system. So as you can see here, this is my old strip mine. I got my first diamonds right here, and I didn't use it for very long. Okay, so right here in the middle here is actually a little setup that I quite like. This is my concrete converter / ore fortuner. So basically, I'll just stand right here in this corner and hold down left click and right click at the same time, kind of like in the pumpkin pusher, except I'll have a pickaxe out. This basically converts whatever block I need into either the raw resources or into concrete, or I can strip logs. This is actually really helpful. I actually come back to this base usually to use this because I don't have an equivalent of this in the new city, which I'm planning on making at some point. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up for this cave base. In the front here, there's kind of this monolith, this coal ore monolith. At one point, I was fortuning coal ore here. I was making a massive tower, and then when I got to these last 16, I just felt like it was important to keep around. I couldn't really think of why, but I kept this around, and I added this little ruin to it. I guess to remind me that this world has always been pretty old. So over here, this is my old tree farming area. I actually still use this sometimes. And then here is the ice farm, which as you can see, I've actually visited recently to build a project, which we'll get into later. But yeah, this is a really simple design that served me pretty well in every single player world I've ever had. And I'm definitely planning on having something like this in the new city. If we fly down over here, you can see in this river valley, if you can call it that, I have some primitive farms going on. Before I had my automatic sugarcane farm in the new city, I just put sugarcane on this coast here, and that was enough for me. This is some wheat, which I would feed the cows. That's how I got food. So going on over here, this is my Emerald City. So this is the first thing that I made here. This is the villager breeder, and I believe it still works. It's producing beetroot now. It used to produce carrots and potatoes, but at some point it switched over to beetroot. I'm not sure how. This is a Impulse SV design, which in my new city I would switch out for the Logical Deep Boy design because I felt like this was a bit bulky. So those villagers that were made there would eventually become all of these villagers here. And this is actually where I still get my enchanted books. So I haven't zombified them and cured them because I just felt like that wasn't super necessary because I was getting a lot of emeralds anyways. So I just never bothered with that. Unfortunately, some of them have been struck by lightning and turned into witches. Over here, this entire Mason area was completely burned down, and so to get bricks, I just put them in the ground like this. And this was before I made the new Mason setup in the new city. So over here is my current mob farm. It produces a ton of mobs and a lot of items. So basically, it's just a flushing Nembon design, and I've always found these to be the best. Lying over here is the exact same melon and pumpkin farm that's in my new city, but with a slightly larger storage. And so a trend you might notice with these buildings is that this was before I kind of knew how to build properly. So I would have this farm, and instead of like covering it up with like a good looking building, I would just kind of mold it into a building-esque shape. Like all these are very uncanny shapes, almost what you would get if you asked an AI to generate a Minecraft building. But that's what that's what my building was like back then, and I think I've gotten a lot better over time. So this right here is the most recent building here in this city. I think it's over a year old at this point, but this is my cactus farm. Much larger than the one in the new city, but I haven't run this for very long. There's a shulker box filler, and there's no output currently, but yeah, so I don't really like this city, and I would like to eventually remove my dependence on this area entirely, but I think it's still worth keeping around as a reminder of how I've changed as a builder, how I've changed as a Minecraft player, and honestly how I've changed as a person. Okay, actually one small thing that I forgot over here is the spawner that I was talking about earlier, where I got the antiques from, right here. So this is a very primitive beacon that I set up, but in here is my skeleton spawner. So what I did interesting with this was that was the way that I processed the items. So I just have the skeletons flow through here, and then I kill them, and then their items continue flowing up into the storage system here. And there is actually automated sorting, but this was the XP farm that I relied on for a good while before I got to the end. As you can see, I just kind of kill them, and then the items flow through. Before exploring the end, I just want to get everything that I've done in the overworld done and dusted. So there's a few landmarks over here that I think are significant to mention. Over here, if we fly over here, this was the quarry that was eventually going to become the slime farm that I talked about earlier before I completely ran out of motivation. As you can see, I had some plans for pipes that would come out to transport the slime balls, but I dug all the way down here manually. And as you can see, it's a pretty long way down, and I just never decided to turn this into a full farm, because these kinds of slime chunk farms just aren't the best way to make slime farms anymore. And even though this was like a really optimal slime chunk setup, I think this is still slower than just a regular mushroom-based modern slime farm. And so this is kind of unfortunate, but this is like a permanent gash in the world, a permanent scar. Now to get to the other landmarks, I actually want to go by boat. So at numerous points around my world here, along this great river system, I actually have little docks. And so the reason this is so that I used to get around my world primarily by boat before I set up the current nether hub. Okay, so I couldn't find a boat anywhere, but I'm just gonna craft one right here. So I believe we need 5 planks. Okay. Okay. So I dug out a navigable system of boatways. I have some very, very fond memories with my sister just traveling down these boatways with shaders on, and it would be really pretty. And that was a few years ago now, but I just have those very fond memories. So we can take a trip down memory lane, or memory river in this case. We can call this memory river. So in this general direction, there are some things to look at. So I have a swamp area where I used to get slime balls before I started digging the quarry, and there's also a unfinished mansion project. There's a lot of unfinished projects in this area. So this is quite a long distance, but you can see a lot of the parts where I obviously had to dig manually because the river immediately becomes super shallow and it becomes 1 block deep. I honestly don't really like the new 1.18 terrain generation, but the one thing that I will say that it does better than the old style is it has deeper and wider rivers, which I really like. I feel like if I created this world after 1.18, I might still be using this to get around. Okay, I think we can see it in the distance there. Yup, that's the unfinished mansion project. So what I tried to do with this mansion here, I'm just going to open up my world map. I don't really use this that often in the world, but I'm going to use this to illustrate. So if we get off here, we can fly over to the mansion. I was planning on basically turning this entire area into where I built my agricultural farms. So sugarcane farm, bamboo farm, cactus farm, etc. I would just build it all around this, so it would be like a huge plantation. But then eventually over time, I just kind of got bored of this project, and I just decided that I would just integrate those farms into my world. So this was before I built the cactus farm in the old city. I still have materials here to build these pathways, as you can see, but I only ever got one done, which is to this northern river here. This is a pretty nice mansion. It's got an interior all the way through. There's really not that much else to it. It's just a purely decorative build. But there was going to be a storage room and there was going to be farms around here, but I just never got to finishing that. Maybe at some point we can eventually revisit this project, re-terraform the land, add in all the paths, add in all the farms, but that's going to be definitely for a later date. I believe if we head all the way up here, some of the carpets broke eventually, but I believe if we head all the way up here, there's going to be a portal. This connects us to the nether roof. And so I think I should explain how this nether roof works exactly. So the thing with elytra is that you can travel usually at an average speed of about 30 blocks per second. Now, packed ice boatways travel at 40 blocks per second. However, with elytra, you can go in straight lines in any direction that you want to whatever destination you have, instead of sticking to rigid lines like ice boat path would have to. So, as you can see here, I just kind of connected up my entire nether like this, centered on the old city and the old cave. I actually feel like this is probably the most cost-effective and easy way to build a transport system on the nether roof here, because instead of having to set up all the infrastructure to get packed ice just to go in rigid straight lines, you can just lay down a line of torches, do some basic trigonometry to find the angle you need to be at, and then just you can instantly travel in straight lines, and it's super simple. So over here is the swamp that I talked about earlier, and there's honestly not much to see, but I built a portal connection to it, so we're gonna go see it. Alright, I don't think I built anything here. I was originally planning on building some kind of fortress, maybe a junk boat, but I just never got to that. Again, we can revisit this project at some point, but that would probably be after New City. Right, so now I want to go to my clay mining area. So that's New City, that's the portal to New City. But over here, I have another portal. This will bring us about 4,000 blocks in the overworld to a mesa, where I get my terracotta. This also acted as my mine before New City, but after I closed down the mine at my old cave base. As you can see right here, this is a mesa, and right here is the fall. And as you can see here, there's a basic strip mine going on. I even laid down soul sand so I could soul speed around. And so I actually only got to digging out these tunnels. I didn't even start the strip mines just because by the time I finished making this, 1.18 had already come out. And so this isn't the best level. This is Y11. This isn't the best level to mine for diamonds anymore. So this was eventually abandoned as well. And basically nowadays, I mine at specific Y levels for the ores I want. I don't really have a centralized mine anymore. And I barely mine at all. Maybe like once every few months just to collect resources. So this project is kind of dead in the water. But maybe at some point we can make some kind of tunnel bore or something to get a ton of diamonds here. But that's kind of this project. So if we now head to the opposite corner of our nether system, we will find the end portal. By the way, when flying with an elytra, usually I'll get up to about Y200, then I'll set my pitch to between 3 and 10 degrees. This will allow you to speed up to 30 blocks per second. Here is my portal to the end. As you can see right here, I actually connected this up to a chunk loader, and we'll see very soon why. So over here, what I can do is set my spawn, and this is my portal to the end. It's all made of concrete. It looks like the end. I think this is super cool. But as you can see down here, I also have my sand duper. So the reason I decided in the new city to build my church out of sand was because I can get a ton of it for free. Now, the reason I believe this is ethical is because sand is just not a renewable resource in Minecraft currently, and I believe it should be and it will be at some point, and because it's so tedious and unnecessarily destructive to get, I just felt like it made more sense to obtain it here. This is different from string or carpets or whatever, where duping it I think is not the right way to go, because you can get them perfectly fine through other means, but sand, there's no way to get it other than destroying the world. And so I felt like this was a more appropriate way to do it. So if we want to turn on the duper here, what we do is we flip on both of these levers. One is for the chunk loader, and one is for the actual duping mechanism itself. So I need the chunk loader in order to keep the overworld loaded while I'm in the end. So if we just hop in here, we can see what happens is the sand will just drop through onto these rails, and then in here they'll go into the storage system where I actually am pretty stocked on sand currently, so I don't really need to run this farm. Over here as well, I actually have an obsidian farm. Over here you can just break this pathway and it regenerates every time an object travels through it. So this is how I get my obsidian. If you look at the general design of this area, this platform, this is actually what inspired my church. So this is based off of a end city, but as you can see, it has the dome, it has the chandeliers in it. But that's the main portal here. There's a few landmarks in the end that I want to talk about. First is this very rudimentary path here into my Enderman farm. So as you can see right here, this is my end stone quarry, and that's the Enderman farm down there. This is probably the fastest XP farm in my world. I can get up to level 30 pretty much instantly. Essentially this is a Nembon design, but I also added my own sorting system here, so it'll dispense out the ender pearls into these shulker boxes. And I use shulker boxes because in my ender chest I actually store all of my pearls in shulker boxes, so I can switch out this box right here instantly to restock on pearls. I have a ton of anvils here, I have a full enchanting setup. Really, this area has pretty much everything you would need for enchanting or repairing. Okay, now that I've returned, if we head over here to the shulker farm, which I've marked out with a waypoint. I don't really like to use waypoints, but I felt like it was necessary for this one. As you can see, as it starts loading in here, this is my shulker farm. So I took the shulkers from that end city and I transported it into this setup here. This is a design by Ray's Works, inspired by Etho's shulker reactor. As you can see, it's all covered in water so the shulkers don't escape, but we can actually get a decent view of all the shenanigans going on in here. The shulkers are duplicating themselves and getting killed by themselves, and it's producing just a crazy amount of shells. More shells than I know what to do with, honestly. So shulker shells are no longer the limiting factor in how many shulker boxes I make, but it's the chests now. But now that we have our bamboo farm, it's not even going to be that. I have literally unlimited shulker boxes, so I'm going to stock up on those quickly, and we can head back to the overworld. So in terms of the end, I have some plans. I'm planning on linking up all of these towers and making a big end castle, which I think would be pretty cool. I'm also planning on killing the Ender Dragon 20 times to get all of the, I forgot what those are called, but I'm going to get all of them so I can travel around the end quicker. But other than that, I don't have a crazy amount. Alright, and here we are on the other side. So the only thing left to see in the overworld is Spawn Town. Because it's in the spawn chunks, it's pretty prime placement for, yeah, right here. It's a pretty prime placement for my iron farm and some basic furnace setups. So I actually spawned over here in this plain, pretty much like right there, and then as I was coming over here I saw this village and I spent my first few nights here before moving on to Old Town, or sorry, the Old Cave, and then I built Old City, and then I moved on to New City. So as you can see here in this village, it's pretty barren, but all the villagers that were here have been moved to Old City, and then it was the villagers in Old City that I then transported to New City. So the villagers in this specific village actually populated basically my whole world. As you can see, this is my iron farm. Way too much iron that I know what to do with. I built this back when I was a bit of a communist type. You know, I'm not into that anymore. But, and yeah, that's a topic for another day. But definitely this has a very Soviet brutalist aesthetic to it. And I was kind of going for that for Spawn Town. I think we can continue that, but yeah, this is definitely, that's gonna go. So, as I alluded to at the beginning of this showcase, this is the setup that I used to smelt all of the copper that I used in my stuff. And oh my gosh, I must have left this here. I have a bunch of nether bricks in here. This is the outrageous setup that I used to smelt all of my stuff prior to building the new smelter in my new city. And there's honestly not that much else to this place. There's a chicken coop, cactus farm, but that's about it. In terms of plans for this place, I was thinking potentially building an even larger furnace setup at some point. Maybe like upwards of 500 furnaces. So that's 10 times bigger than the one I have in New City. Maybe a tree farm too, because this region is where I get all my trees. In many ways this is the oldest, but it also has potential to be the newest area of my world. So I'm gonna head back over to the new city here to go into the nether and talk about my latest project, which is my gold farm. Okay, so this will lead us to the gold farm. Okay, and that's the gold farm. So currently it's very bare bones. As you can see, all the redstone is exposed, but I have very big plans for how to decorate this. I didn't record the process of building this, unfortunately. I just wanted to get the project done and dusted, but this is actually a pretty intricate system. So in both of these cells here, I have a total of 48 piglins, which constitutes my bartering setup. So you can put the gold up there, turn on the pistons here. This is actually the collection system, so it pushes all the items into a slime block ice pushing system that'll move all of the items up into the storage. 4.5. You can just see how quickly all of this gets traded. All of the items are getting bartered out here. I can show the process of the items getting dumped out, but essentially what happens is they go through a slime block path up to this elevator here, and it pushes them through this system, which actually, this is broken. Alright, so this showcase has not gone to plan exactly, but essentially what should be happening is they should be cycling around here into these filters and then being put into shulker boxes, as you can see here. But the rest of this is obviously a gold farm, and so I'll show that in action. Actually, wait, I'll do this first. So this right here is my shulker setup. Basically, I put shulker boxes into here. This will feed it into the system. Having the comparator light on shows that I have enough shulker boxes, so I need to refill these two. I'll get to that at some point later. But up here is the part that actually farms the gold. So as you can see here, I have quite a lot of piglins. If I turn on the piston pushers here, as you can see, it's going to start pushing. All I have to do is face this way and swipe at this armor stand. Basically, this gold farm is a culmination of everything that I've learned about mob farming, collection systems. We can turn this off. Both of these actually trigger more mechanisms, but I'm not even going to get into that because this is easily the most technical project I think I've ever worked on. And so the gold nuggets would go into this. I've recently just crafted a bunch. This is less than 2 or 3 hours of AFK. I already have this much. So this has been a very profitable project, but in the future I'm definitely going to decorate this. I might even make that a standalone video. But I think now we've reached the end of this showcase. So I want to thank you guys for watching all the way through. You guys should totally like and subscribe. I'm not sure when or what the next video will be about, but I guarantee you that this world definitely has a lot more in store. And so I'll see you guys next time. See ya.